which announced that the invasion was about to begin, and he was wishing his men well, even though he knew that, for many of them, and they knew too, that they'd be going up against an enemy that just wasn't going to quit. So, it was...
He had his doubts too. He had a letter already written apologizing for the loss of
so many
men, and he was ready to pull out. So it was kind of touch and go, I guess.
Would you like to have a seat? I'll sit down too. So, I'll just ask you a few general questions about your background and stuff. When you went into the service, or excuse me, you were in the Coast Guard, right?
Yeah.
When did you join the Coast Guard?
1943, in September. My mother and father just died, and it was a home for me, really. But since the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor, I was really anxious to get in and lick them, really. That's the way we felt. That was the general temper of things in those days. It was not a war like something like Vietnam, which was really highly questionable. This was a definite cause. Tubbs Turkle called it the good war.
The good war.
Yeah.
I remember very
You had
well.
a cause, a clear-cut cause.
And in 1943, how old were you?
18.
You're only 18.
Yeah.
Is this the book you're referring to?
That's the one.
The Good War by Studs Churchill. If you ever want to read good oral history of World War II, written by the people who lived it, fought it, like Mr. Leone, that's the book you want.
I've written several books, Vagabonds of War. They're not ready for distribution in school yet.
What's that?
I said you have to pass censorship before they're take them into the school library. A lot of bad language, you know.
Well, that's the way it
That's what the
was.
service is.
Right. So in 1943 you joined up. When did you arrive in Europe?
In 43, I went to Manhattan Beach, and our athletic instructor was Jack Dempsey, former heavyweight champion of the world, and New Lambers, and I formed a lasting relationship with these people. And we, I reported for duty on an LST, and I couldn't figure out what an LST was. And we carried our sea bag up, and was newly graduated from the boot camp, and this long gangway, and that was the biggest ship I've ever seen in my life. 327 feet long, 50 foot wide. And after I saw the rest of the ships when I got in service, it looks tiny by comparison. But to me, it was my first experience. And
Now, what for the students? What does LST stand for?
Landing ship tanks.
And what was the job of the ship?
Well, what we did, we carried small boats that went in on the assault, the initial assault. And we carried tanks on the tank deck down below with an elevator, and it would bring the vehicles from the top side, trucks and empty tank guns.
So it would actually carry the tanks and the heavy...
And the personnel. We had that. And we also had at the rear of our tank deck a complete surgical operating room. And perhaps you heard the Foxy 29 medical team. They were quite noted in World War II, and we had a team aboard, U.S. Navy doctors and medical corpsmen who distinguished themselves under fire and saved a lot of lives. And when you, our mess was at the stern, back of the operating room, but there's many a time we walked in there and set our trays down, had to try a tray slide in blood. They just got you operating on the dinner table, you know, we ate on, so things were not cozy. And we lived with that for a little while.
So when did you arrive in England?
Well, we were in Africa first. We survived an attack on our convoy in the Mediterranean, and landed in Zerti and Tunis. And then we left there and left for England. We got in England around May 1944, and then we trained for the invasion. And unfortunately, a few of our LSTs got sunk by German E-boats. They're like a PT boat, but they're very, very fast. Faster than anything we had. We did well over 40 knots. Schnell boats. And he came in at night among our LSTs who were training, you know, practicing landing troops that slept in sands. You know, it was very well covered up during the war. He came out not too long ago, really.
It was top secret.
Yeah, top secret. And they killed a lot. They killed more soldiers there than they did on the initial assault on Normandy. And E-boats got away. And
They sank a couple of those ships.
Oh yeah, 2 or 3 LSTs with all of the troops aboard, and this was in England.
Right.
You know. before we had a chance to invade France.
And they couldn't broadcast the news, they couldn't let people know that this terrible tragedy had occurred because it was top secret. You didn't want to tip the Germans off.
Matter of fact, they've uncovered bodies now. They're investigating something, friendly fire.
Oh,
That somebody had substituted live ammo for fake ammo. So this is a big cover-up now that's going on in England. I'm in correspondence with the English, and I know I doubt there was a second family during the war. They treated me very well. And I wasn't like a lot of the GIs over there, you know. I was very selective in my choice of female companionship.
Oh, that's nice. That's always good to hear.
That's what life's all about, you know.
That's right. I agree. And so that was in May 1944. That was just before the invasion. You guys were training pretty hard. When did you really know that it was time?
Well, around June the 1st, we were locked in, sealed off. The whole area was sealed off. And so we were in Falmouth, England, part of B backup force going in. Second wave, the first wave failed, we would go in. And everything was sealed off. The soldiers couldn't speak to anyone. All their bivouac areas along the seaport, or the coast along the seaports were sealed off. And I still kept up communication with a girl at shore I knew by semaphore, you know. That's kind of tricky, but they watched you pretty close. So nobody could leave the ship. That was for quite a while until we had the orders to go. We were supposed to rendezvous in the middle of the channel, and it was stormy, really bad. The channel is noted for sudden storms, and the tides got real tidal bores. The tide moves in fast, and we were on LST. I don't know if you ever seen an LST. It's flat. It's built just like a sardine can. It has no keel, and it only draws about 8 foot of draft, and it rolls. Your rowboat could go by and it would rock, you know. And it was very, very bad duty, you know, especially when you want to keep your food down. And so we met at the middle of the channel in a circle, and we were supposed to spread out, and the British and the Canadian to our left, and soar Juno Beach, and we were supposed to go to the right on Utah and Omaha Beach. And they turned us back. It was too stormy. So,
what day was that?
That was a 4th or 5th, I think, somewhere around there. I don't remember. Then we got word that was go ahead, and that was the 6th. The night, evening of the 5th, paratroopers went over, and the Pathfinders went first, supposed to drop the flares to mark the way for the 82nd, when we were first to drop. And
The Pathfinders, were they the ones on the gliders?
Yeah.
The Pathfinders would go in on the gliders silently behind enemy lines, and they'd like
And you had paratroopers too to drop them. First, the lead C-47s would drop them. And then the paratroopers would land, and they'd try to seal off the Contenton Peninsula where Sherman was located. We were trying to get a seaport.
I'm just going to pull this map down just so the kids can have something to look at behind us when we're back here. But of course, we're talking about the Normandy beachhead being here. Cherbourg Peninsula is this little point coming out. And, yeah, when he's talking about the rendezvous in the channel, they're out here, and it's where the Canadians, the British, and the Americans are all coming together, and then going towards their respective beaches, because there were 5 beachheads.
They turned us back. There was a lot of problems, and Eisenhower had a hell of a problem trying to locate and contact the vessels. They turned back a few, kept going.
Did they really?
Yeah,
they could blow the whole thing, right?
Oh, sure. And what they'd done, the minesweepers had gone ahead of us and cleared the channel. The Germans had mines laid up and down the whole area of the seacoast, and they went and cleared the mines. And a few of the minesweepers got hit themselves and sank before my eyes. And, you know, that's a bad duty. And they finally, when it was cleared, June the 6th, we had to go ahead. And the first went out, and they landed. And we came in the 7th. Came in, we couldn't get in. It was the fighting was too heavy on the beach, even on the 7th. And, but we did manage to get a toehold late on June the 6th. They were inland. There were still Germans firing. And there were so many mine obstacles. There were stakes driven in the ground at an angle, tetrahedron, two in that shape, sort of, with stakes and with color mines. And when the water would go out, you could see the tide for about a half a mile out. You could see all the obstacles. And then when the tide went in, of course, you couldn't see them. And we originally were going in at high tide, which the Germans expected us to do.
That's these things right here. Sorry to interrupt you, but this is a silly penis comic strip book. Every June 6th, they put this in to remember. And you see little Snoopy trying to get ashore. But those are the obstacles.
You mostly had Eisenhower and the paratroopers in this time. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And when the water came in, you couldn't see the obstacles, so they had to go in at low tide. I mean, high tide, or whatever you want to call it, low when the water was out. The channel was notorious for its changing tides. They changed, you know, went way in and way out. And, so, but the first ones went in there, got snagged, got caught on the teller mines. 3 Coast Guard LCIs went in loaded with 200 or 300 men. They got hit, and they were flaming coffins. And,
now this was on the 6th or the 7th?
The 6th, yeah. Hemingway was there. Ernest Hemingway, the famous writer. Ronnie Pyle was on the LSD next to us.
Was he really?
Yeah, he got killed later on in the Pacific. And they, in the afternoon, they finally got in. But meanwhile, we had heavy tanks and heavy 155 millimeter howitzers going in. And they had flotation gear to keep them afloat. They were worthless. In practice, they were all right, but most of the
Are you talking about the floating batteries?
the flotation, yeah, on the tanks.
Oh.
Yeah, flotation. Canvas bags, and they were inflated to keep them afloat. Well,
Keep the tanks afloat while they're unloading them?
Yeah, well, they let them off, and they were float on their own power. They had screws. They called them DDTs, I think. They were driven for propellers. And they sank immediately and drowned in large people. Then they lost just about all the 155 millimeter howitzers. Then the LCTs came in. They're landing craft. It's wide and flat. It's just like a box. It's like a box. And their rockets, all they did was entertain the Germans, I think. The rockets went overhead. The Germans didn't sustain any damage, very minor. And the planes went over and bombed them, and they would bomb them inland in the swamps. The bombs fell harmlessly. And I think we killed more Frenchmen than we liberated in that kind of a move. And they killed a lot of kids. You know, one little girl back at the beach, she's 5 years old, she sat there in a doorway and then staring, and her parents just been killed by our artillery, from our long-range gun naval artillery. And our destroyers, they weren't meant for this kind of duty, but they were called in for fire support, and they went in, their bottoms of the destroyers scraped the bottom of the sand, and they were very accurate. One church steeple, they hit the church steeple. There was a sniper, a German sniper, and he called for fire, and he hit that church steeple. The first time they hit the bottom part, the second shot hit the first part that was falling. That's how accurate that destroyer was. So I think the destroyer saved the day, really, between you and I.
At Omaha Beach?
Yeah, at Omaha Beach, absolutely. Yeah,
and that wasn't part of the plan?
No, not really. They had to do something. They weren't. I think his name Blockel, a fella, German fella, young kid like myself. He stood there machine gunning the soldiers in the water, and they had predetermined positions. The guns were locked in to fire, converge on the areas of the beach, and their positions were invisible to us because they were outside. You know, all you could see was the concrete abutments. And this guy had tears in his eyes. Here's an enemy. He had tears in his eyes. Please go, Yanks, back. Please leave. Like shooting apples in a barrel.
We saw him yesterday in that videotape.
Local?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's terrible. It's terrible. And then they got ashore. We sent in LCVPs with 30 caliber ammunition to relieve a colonel that was stuck up near the Potemkin Peninsula. The Rangers had meanwhile worked around the back and gone inland. And finally they thought it was time to send the LSTs in, the bigger ships. And we started to go in, and our bow lookout yelled there was something in the water, and it was a wreckage of an LCT, I think, that got hit by the Germans. So we backed off, and we waved the LS team back was in. And I think it was 5:15 or something. They got about off our starboard beam, and it blew right in half. And if you can picture something 327 feet long and 50 foot wide, steel. And these kids, I knew most of the crew. They had pigeons on there, and dogs and cats. And it's the only LSD I've seen over there had so damn many pets. And that thing got blown up. And that was the most terrible thing I think I've ever seen. But there, for the grace of God, go I, you know. Because if we hadn't seen that wreckage and stopped, we'd have gone on and been blown in half, just like that one there.
Hit a mine?
Yeah, hit a mine, and it blew right in the midships. And one section sank right away, the other, well, it floated for a long time. And as a matter of fact, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, they filmed it. It was still there, laying in a piece of it, you know, half of it. But then we went in, we finally got in, and our captain was drunk. He was an old Portuguese fella, and he was drunk, and he was singing, of all things, if you saw the fella, he reminds you of, I don't know if you remember the old comic strip character, The Shadow. But he was a very, very overbearing, intimidating kind of a fellow, and I was deathly afraid of him. I was 18 years old, and it didn't take much of me to fear anything, really. I was in an environment that I was very unfamiliar with and terrified.
Sure.
And he'd walk by and cackle at night, like the shadow, and you'd see the glow of his cigarette. And when the glow went out, you know the cigarette had reached his mouth, and he'd spit it out and light another one. And he was a tough guy, and he went in, when we were going into the beach to unload, they had packed mattresses behind the conning tower on the bridge, all the officers did. And they were afraid of shrapnel, and that stopped the shrapnel from hitting. And one little short officer, Shorty Fairland, we called him, he was standing on a wooden box of some kind, I don't know, he looked ridiculous anyway, but here over the PA started crackling, and here comes this song, there's the oaks and oaks, he goats and little lambs, he divey. And we all burst out laughing, and we said, boys, he smashed the skipper. And then, you know, it was a morale booster in reverse, because we said, heck, he's human like we are. He's scared, you know. And so we hit the beach and started to unload, and a friend of mine, Marion Burroughs, was in the 175th Infantry anti-tank, and they told, you know, little anti-tank guns behind them for use against tanks. And we started to go, and the brake locked on the anti-tank gun he was towing. So he waved, here we get into the waving around business. He waved the second truck, and there was a wrecker too, they used to be towing away trucks. Pulled around, and as soon as they got off the ramp, the mine exploded and blew them up. It blew those two vehicles up in the air. And their screams were something you would never want to hear. You know, if you could picture a cat dumping gasoline on and lighting a match to it, that's exactly what happened to a human being. And it was something I'll never forget. I know that, very traumatic. And the trucks blew up. They were full of bazooka ammunition. And all I saw was Lucky Strike cigarettes, Old Gold cigarettes, and Chesterfields scattered all over. And a lot of dud grenades, too. And we couldn't get out there. Every time we moved, the snipers, there were still German snipers that had a network of tunnels up on back of the lounge. We didn't know that. And incidentally, we ran right straight into the German 352nd Infantry Division. They weren't supposed to be there. So our intelligence failed us on that. So this is part of the problem too. But they still hung around, and on the 7th and 8th, they were still shooting, sniper fire, every now and then, enough to aggravate you, you know. And I had run down to help, to assist in some way or other, and something hit my helmet and tore my helmet open and took some skin off my head. And I don't know whether the sniper hit me that time in the leg or not, I don't remember. But I was so busy trying to get off the top side to get down. And I don't know whether it was, I think it could have been shrapnel from the exploding trucks, it had to be, you know. And I got down there and I said, I needed another helmet. So there were helmets all over the place naturally laying on the beach. So I went out to grab one, and there were spurts of sand going up in front of them. So apparently the Germans were waiting for me to go out and try to grab one. So one of the medical team went out, and I communicate with him now. He's a doctor. He became a doctor. He'd always wanted to become a doctor, and he did finally. He's from Massachusetts. And Chingomani, his name is, Bob Chingolani. And he went out and grabbed the guy that was in the water on fire. And I don't know whether he got the Silver Star for that or not. One of our officers, a little officer, Cerf, his name was, Mr. Cerf. And a very prominent family in Chicago, by the way, show business or something. And the other officers used to pick on him because he was Jewish. And they make him stand on the table and dance and, you know, all that degrading thing because he was a junior officer. They all got to drinking, and that's what they did. And I thought that was despicable behavior. He's the fellow who went out and grabbed and pulled a guy out of the wreckage. He had more guts than the other fellows who were picking on the big officers. The macho John Wayne type were hiding behind the bridge, up there behind the mattresses. And he got back and he saved them, I guess. And somebody yelled, close those damn bow doors. So we lifted the ramp up. We had to go in the control room to lift the ramp up. It went up very slowly, believe me. And a lot of that stuff come flying in all the time inside the LST. And then we lowered and we closed the bow doors. And he's probably got a photograph of the trucks after they burned and while they were burning. The Coast Guard took a lot of photography there, believe it or not. They were very busy people. If it wasn't for the Coast Guard photographers, we wouldn't have much we have records.
Did they take these photos, you think?
Yeah, most of them did, yeah. What was his name, the famous photographer? He came in there and his...
Capo, was it?
Capo, yeah. He took some pictures. He was in there on the first wave. He took one that came out fairly good. The rest were, in the anxiety to develop, they ruined most of them.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a shame, too. They would have been outstanding, probably award-winning photos under fire, you know.
You didn't get too many photographs on that day, because
No, you
no one
didn't.
stood around taking pictures.
No one knows what happened, really. I don't remember. I got insulin shock treatment after the war, and I don't remember anything. But I have my diary to refer to, and the other fellows loaned me their diary, and I have the declassified deck logs from the ship. After the war, they declassified a lot of Navy records, and I have a minute-by-minute record of what happened during my whole stay on the LSD, as a matter of fact, almost 2 years. And I use that to write my book. Otherwise, if I depended on my memory, it never would have happened, you know. Because, when you take insulin shock treatment, it removes a section of your memory. You don't know who you are. And my wife, my present wife, said that the government did you a favor by doing that. And I said, in what ways? Well, I saw your wife the other day from your first marriage, and I think they did you a favor if you don't remember what she looked like, you know. So. That's, you know, so probably one of the fringe benefits there, I don't know really, I couldn't say, but it's a shame. I can't remember what my kids, I see them, they're strangers in my first marriage. They removed that section, you know, with the insulin shock treatment. I don't know if they still practice that or not, I don't think so.
I don't know what it is.
That's it, they give you insulin and juice or something that destroys your memory, sections of it.
Now, did that happen to a lot of vets who were treated for that? You think?
Yeah, oh yeah, I was treated for a lot. We were all basket cases, you know.
Oh, sure.
Oh yeah, they said they locked up the whole ship when I got back from Boston. We were throwing oranges at each other, setting fire to the ship, and you know, I don't know, it was like a black tunnel we were in, you know, really. Been better off taking drugs in a way because the results were the same. Stress, trauma, you know, and I have a fellow that I didn't know about this until after the war. He's from my hometown. He's like a big brother. And his name was Beansy Borliska, and he was in the engineers. You know, he had the circle stripe on, and they went in and demolition experts and blew up the obstacles and whatnot. He got hit on the left side of his face, took his arm off. I didn't know that. I met him after the war, and he had the same insignia that I did, the same amphibious insignia, only it was blue and gold. And I looked, his arm was missing, and of course his eye. And he had a roll of bills, and he and I went into a bar, and immediately we became involved with a big brawl. He gave the bartender $20, and the bartender said he only gave him 10, and he and we cleaned up the bar real bad. And they put Beansy in he's been in the Canandaigua hospital since that time. And in 1996 he died. And he's been in that hospital all his life. And that's a guy that survived D-Day, and I'm not sure I would want to survive and live that kind of a life, not really. I went to visit him, he didn't even recognize me. You know, his own mother broke her heart, and his family.
When did you visit?
After the war, when I got out of the service. I looked him up. I was born and brought up on the same street in Utica. That's originally where I'm from. And he was like a big brother. He always looked out for me, great big Polish fellow, burly, you know, and nobody there confronted him. It was very intimidating, size and so forth. So he was a big brother, just a big teddy bear. And I imagine the Germans found him to be a big target too. So you know, it was terrible. That's one of the things that hurt. And this is a remnant of war. This is an aftermath of war, and it stays with you the rest of your life. So anytime you feel like fighting, you want to argue and punch somebody, just remember that it leads to bigger things. And you only suffer yourself, really, you know, you can't. This hostility, it took me probably 10 or 15 years to get out of my system. And the cops are walking around with broken necks in Utica, and, you know, it's not a good thing to talk about. But this is the lasting effect it has on the average person who's seen combat. The veterans in Vietnam, I wouldn't want to go through what they did. And when they came back, they were spat upon by the American public. Because it was a war we shouldn't have been over anyway, I guess. But at least our war, like I would reiterate, was a good war because we were fighting the Axis, who were seeking world domination and to enslave people. I'm sure you're all familiar with the diary of Anne Frank. She heard we landed on Omaha, and she expected great things. She was going to be liberated, but the Germans got to her first. She died in a concentration camp. And actually, we killed more Frenchmen than the Frenchmen, especially the farmers, weren't glad to see us. They weren't glad to see us. The Germans treated them well. They intermarried. They born children. They were one big happy family. They lived well in Normandy. This was the Calvados area of Normandy where they made this apple cider. A couple drinks of that, and you'd think you were on Mars someplace, you know. But, the old farmers kept them going. They had nice farms, dairy cattle, and we came in with our naval guns, big batteries, and blew everything all to hell. Cows all over the place, their stomachs all bloated and their legs sticking up in the air. You go up, stick a knife in, you can smell the gas. They come out, you know. And we were nice, innocent kids, 18 years old by that time. We'd come up and cut there'd be German soldiers dead, and they had some nice rings on, and we'd take our knife and chop their fingers off. We couldn't get the rings off because they were bloated. And we chopped it. This is what we did. I wouldn't have the guts to think about doing that right now. But
they all did it, though. Don't you think the Germans did it to the Americans and the Japanese? One
the paratroopers hanging in the trees off Cotentin there, and what they did to them, I don't even want to go into detail. But to exact some kind of revenge, they brought some girls down there, very pretty French girls. They had S painted on their jackets. And they were 82nd or 101st Airborne. They were all paratroopers. 67, big fellows. They grabbed one of them right in front, full sight of us, and put a wire around her neck and garroted her. See here, come on. Then he took the rest and shot them, because apparently the paratroopers had been up in the Virgil Samir. This is about where we landed. And Samir means near the water. And the German girls, the French girls would wave and flirt with the Americans. And when the Americans would walk by, they'd shoot them in the back. Because a lot of them were married to German officers or lived with them, you know. And they sure weren't glad to see us land at that time, because we killed half the French people to liberate them. I really thought about that little French girl. And this was terrible. I felt that weighed heavily on my conscience when I saw. But then again today, if you go visit American Cemetery back of Omaha Beach, there's an American colonel lying dead in there, and his only son is lying next to him. So that's the price they paid. And up a little further, you'll see the German cemetery. And these people are, like I said before, they're united in death. That's about the only thing. It was a war is futile. War is useless, especially now in a nuclear holocaust. There aren't going to be any winners, you know that. I don't care what. The service is a good place to be in, don't get me wrong. And especially, I'd rather be in now than any other time because of the sophisticated equipment, you learn a trade, a profession. You know. It's not like the old days where you had your superior officers kicking your butt all the time and dumping you out of the sack and hit you in the head with a flashlight and using abusive language. You can't do that anymore, even soon. So, but
they do that to teachers too.
Well, like the Marines Corps, we went through that in boot camp. But we survived. In spite of concussion, I had to go report to duty each and every day, and I'm glad that they transferred the skipper off. He took command of an LSD that hit a mine, 327 in Duluth. So he was the skipper of a ship that was towed back to the States by a tug, and that was kind of a state of disgrace, I think, really. I said, no, it couldn't happen to a better guy, really. And we got a nice captain on it, saw a lot of action, and things kind of eased up, and, you know, because I was a seaman first. I was the lowest form of humanity there was, lower than fertilizer, you know. We had no rights, nothing. So, that was a pleasant change.
Yeah, I'll go through it. Now, do you recall seeing Eisenhower?
I see him on the beach. I didn't talk to him. I saw Montgomery. They were climbing out of a duck. They come ashore in a duck. It's an amphibious vehicle. I don't know if you kids ever saw one in a parade or not. It looks like a big truck. It's got a propeller in the bottom, and it looks like a boat in the front and a boat in the back. It's about 6 foot, 4 or 5 foot, maybe 6 foot high. It's a big, heavy thing. It's got propellers. It goes in the land and in the water and comes out. There aren't too many of them left. DUKW. And he came ashore in that. And we thought the world of Eisenhower. He was God to us, really. And he was a superb leader. Anybody could work on Montgomery the way he did. Really.
What was wrong with Montgomery?
Prima donna. He was a prima donna.
He was the British
commander. And they stopped him at Caen, you know. He was supposed to go through Caen and go beyond that, take the bridges. But
when you say prima donna, what do you mean?
Well, he swaggered about, and he thought he was the greatest things in sliced bread. And the British, they loved him. They followed him. And he was a good general, Bernard Montgomery. Of course, as you know, later on, he had the conflict with General Patton. And General Patton was a bit overbearing, really. his men used to say, yeah, blood and guts Pat, and yeah, his guts and our blood. And they still admired him, and as they did Montgomery. And the German 21st Division under von Luck, I think it was Hans von Luck, stopped him dead at Montgomery. And of course, that took a lot of pressure off of us. We swung right around and went inland because the Germans were busy trying to push the British back into the sea. And of course, this helped us out in a way. But it was a terrible time, and especially when the GIs, the 175th, I got a letter yesterday from the 175th, the captain, which he listed the places that the 175th went to after they left our ship. And these are the fellows that burned alive, their units. And Marion Burroughs was one of them, and they hit St. Lo. And at St. Lo, our General McNair was killed by a short drop of bombs, if you remember, by the Air Force. General Roosevelt, walking ashore with a cane at Utah, died of a heart attack.
He was the son of the president, right?
Yep. And these units of the 175th, most of them were from Maryland. Mason-Dixon, he had what's the gray and blue, there's a name for it. They had no number. They had no, no logo. It's just that the 116th went in, and the 175th that we brought in, they made it as far as St. Lo, and they got cut to pieces. Finally, the whole unit was decimated. They came back to us in pieces. These are the fellows that made it past this damn mine that blew off. And little by little, and through the bocage country, there's bocage, there's big tall hedges, and they're probably 6, 8, 10, 12 foot tall. And the Germans set up machine guns in them and stopped us dead, and our tanks couldn't go through there either. Until they devised a method where they put angle iron on the front of the tanks and plowed up the roots to get through. But the 175th were cut to pieces, and by the time they got to St. Lo, I think there was 3 or 4 men left out of the original regiment, and finally they all made it back, wounded or dead. And that's what happened. They were all replacements, finally. There was a big turnover of men in such a short space. Of course, the German 352nd was still in there, and they were a crack fighting outfit, veterans. Many campaigns on the Eastern Front with Russia. And we run right dead up against them, and boy, I'm telling you, this General Bradley was going to pull us off Omaha Beach. Things got so bad, and we were losing so many men. For days, you could see bits of their bodies floating. That was a terrible thing. I often thought to myself, why don't they clean that up, But these are human beings, what's left. For days. But Bradley wanted to pull us off the beach. And he said, we're waiting for word. And he was going to wait another hour or two, then pull us off and go over to Utah, because he had a lot better luck over there. In fact, Roosevelt landed over there with his men at a place he wasn't supposed to. The tide took him right out. He said, well, let's start the war right here. And he did. And it was an accident. The tides were so great, they'd sweep the landing boats right along and into the mines. And of course, the Rangers got it bad. They went up first.
We saw that yesterday in the video, too.
Yeah, but we were the backup force, and thank God I wasn't in on the first wave. What I saw was enough. I wanted to leave and go home. Well, that was impossible. And for months after that, we carried casualties, wounded. You slept with the people screaming in their sleep, and you heard the death gargles all night long. And we had to go down and carry stretchers in and feed. I fed one German kid. He was 13 or 14 years old. He had his arm off. And I went up to give him, we had canned cream chicken, where you'd light the can with a match and it would heat up the can. And I proceeded to get a spoonful of cream, I hate chicken, cream chicken, and put it in his mouth, and he spat it at me, all over. About that time, I was going to take the 45 and blow his brains out. But, he was a kid, a young kid. What's a kid, 13, 14? No. And there was an older German next to him who was wounded, and this older German looked 10 years older than me. He was the same age. Gray hair, and he said, don't mind him, he says he lost his mother and father in the Berlin bombing, and he just came from St. Lo, and his complete regiment is gone, platoon, all wiped out, he has nobody, and he snapped. He got hit with a mortar round from you people, he said, us, and blew his arm off above the elbow. get some kind of attraction somewhere. So I wonder what happened to that kid. It's terrible. These are the fruits of war. There's nothing else. There's nothing good to say about it. I can't think of a thing anyway.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming in because our time's almost up here. I just want to add that if anybody, raise your hand if you know somebody who was in World War II or a relative, or I have a sheet I'd like you to take and fill out if you could and get back to me.
I graduated from that, and I hate snakes, and we were down in Corolla, North Carolina, and I could feel those things slithering between my legs. And they were firing live ammo over our heads, and I said, hey, you know. But I endured, and they didn't bother me, the snakes, and I didn't raise my head, so I'm here to tell you about what happened after that. I got assigned to USS LST-27, and I said to myself, what in the heck is an LST, you know? And we boarded in Norfolk, Virginia. I carried my sea bag, along with the rest of the graduates in boot camp, up this long gangway, and this was the biggest vessel I've ever seen in my life. You know, if you head up here in Lake George, it's 327 foot long, envision that, 50 foot wide. That's a big ship.
Now, what's LST stand for?
Landing ship tanks.
Landing ship tanks. So, what was that capacity supposed to be for the landings in Normandy?
Well, we landed. What we did, we carried small boats. We sent the small boats in first, loaded with troops and vital supplies.
And then you turned around and went back?
Then we stayed there. We supported when it was. We were able to. We came in with the LST then and opened the bow doors and dropped the ramp. But at the time, not even the small boats could get in among the obstacles with mines all over the place. They were killing our soldiers like sheep, you know, slaughtered and slaughtered. But we left Norfolk in March of 1944 and landed in Africa, and we had gone through a bad air raid by the Germans in the Mediterranean and U-boat attack, in which we survived. And one ship was hit and set afire. It was a ship carrying lumber, and incidentally, the Coast Guard put the fire out within a couple of hours. It was at the stern of our convoy. I almost lost my life there. I didn't tell you this previously. I was a loader on a 20 millimeter Oerlikon AA gun, and
what's an AA gun?
It's an anti-aircraft gun, 20 millimeter, and it was obsolete now, but then it was a pretty good gun. But it was pretty accurate. It was made in Sweden. And I was about to get another magazine and load when a bomb landed on our port side, a near miss, and swung our LST over to starboard. And I was going through into the dark Mediterranean with that magazine in my hand. And I said, boy, there goes Leone. You're gone. And Kistner, the aimer, grabbed me by the back of my K-Pock life jacket and pulled me back. And that was close. That was my first baptism of fire right there. The German. I was 18 years old, screaming, hysterical, shaking a fist. And if a real German had popped up in front of me on the deck, I probably would have fainted dead away. Yeah, really. You're scared. You know, heroes are heroes, but most of them are scared.
So that was an airplane attack?
That was Luftwaffe. The Ju-88s and the Dorniers come in, torpedo bombers. And what we did, we succeeded in almost completely obliterating a British anti-aircraft cruiser on our port side, and I think some of the guys did it deliberately. They didn't care for the British too much at the time. They knocked their radar out. Yeah. But that's something. That's a story I don't wish to go into. But we sailed from Africa. We reached Africa without further incident, and sailed. We headed for England, and we landed in Swansea, Wales. Where we got liberty, and we unloaded an LCT. And an LCT is it's a wide, flat box, sort of a landing craft, where the ramp drops down and the conning tower is in the back. And we had one on top side. We carried that piggyback. And what we did was fill the starboard bilge, the tanks, ballast tanks, with water, so it would have a list on the starboard side. And then chop the cables holding the LCT on. The LCT was mounted on skids, greased wooden skids. And they severed the cables, and the thing would land in the water with a big splash. We got rid of that thing. We were glad to get rid of it, really, because in heavy seas, we were top heavy. And we had no keels to speak of, 8-foot of draft.
Now, is that what would land the men later on?
Yeah, indeed. That same one, as a matter of fact, went in there and lost it. And from there, we went to Southampton, and then Falmouth. Falmouth, we became part of the B backup force for D-Day, and that was the end of May. And we took on units of the 175th Infantry, which is belonged to the 29th Division. And we were everything was frozen. We couldn't move.
Now this is about what date?
This was the end of May, for about a week before D-Day.
So you're getting ready for the Great Invasion.
Yeah, we were sealed off. The area was sealed off. We couldn't go on liberty. We couldn't talk to the British girls, and that was a sacrifice in those days, believe me, because they were all over the Yanks. We were like the invention of sliced bread. You know, they couldn't get enough of the Yanks. But the Yanks had a lot of money, I guess, and they showed up the British servicemen pretty badly, and their behavior was abominable.
Who's?
The American troops over there, and the British treated them real good. But the Americans, they were spoiled. They had a lot of money and very loud, gregarious. And, you knew they were around. It's the old story. And but they sealed us off, and I think it was the 4th or 5th we were ready to go, and we ended up. We headed toward Piccadilly Circus. That was the name of the circle it comes back to me in the middle of the channel where we were supposed to rendezvous. Then the flotillas would go toward the British beachhead, and we were supposed to go toward the American beachhead, Omaha and Utah Beach.
So just a second, y'all went up to see, let's say the 5th, was it?
It was real stormy, yeah, bad.
And they're going to rendezvous.
The 4th. It was early. It was the 4th. I think it was earlier than that.
Okay.
It was real bad.
And the British, and they had to call it off, right?
Real bad. Yeah. They called it off, and Eisenhower was really blown away about it. And they waited, and I guess I think it was a British meteorologist that saw a break, a window in the weather, and Eisenhower decided to go for it. You know, he kept his fingers crossed. He had a letter ready apologizing for the loss of lives and the withdrawal from the continent in case it failed. And so we went, and the first units moved out from Southampton, from London, from British ports out that way, and Plymouth and Portland, and we were the second. We were a backup force from Falmouth. And by the time we got to the beachhead the next day, it was a mess.
This is June 6th now.
This is the 7th.
7th.
And it was a mess. All you saw was a layer of white smoke on the beach. And the Americans had got off the beach by late on June the 6th. The Rangers had got in behind the Germans. But we were there, it was still hot, mines all over the place. And of course, they had these tetrahedrons and stakes driven in the ground with teller mines sitting on them. And at high tide, they'd come in, you couldn't see them. And our LCVPs had to negotiate between them. And, this was impossible at high tide. You had to wait till the tide was way out. And then the soldiers had to walk almost half a mile on bare ground. You know, nothing, no foliage or anything. And of course, the Germans mowed them down like wheat field. And as I said before, there was a German private sat there with a machine gun just killing Americans and crying when he was doing it. Please go back, I don't want to kill no more. And they kept feeding them into the battle. And at one point, General Bradley was going to pull them off, take all the people at Omaha Beach and bring them over to Utah. And which Utah was a pretty successful landing. Their casualties almost negligible at the time. And we came in with the LSTs. We'd already launched our LCVPs and brought in supplies and troops.
What's LC?
LCVP, that's Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel. It's a Higgins boat. It was invented by Higgins, the boat builder in the United States. And then it was our time for us to come in and unload the tanks. And as we came in, as we started to move in, it was pretty hard to negotiate because the mined obstacles were still all over the place. There were pieces of human bodies floating all over. American soldiers, they had the life belts on that you activate them, they blow up. You press the cartridge, CO2 cartridge. And what it did, they had a heavy pack on, it would upend them and drown them. They couldn't get loose. And we see a lot of the soldiers floating that way. Their life belts worked all right, but it killed them. And the bodies floated to and fro all day long, I guess. So we came in and we were moving, and on the conning tower, officers had barricaded themselves behind a pile of mattresses up on the bridge. You know, not that they were chicken, they were just being, you know, smart about the whole thing. They don't want to get hit with shrapnel. So, and as we proceeded in, the bow lookout yelled, "Wreckage in the water, dead ahead." We stopped. And it was apparently an LCT had been hit earlier and it was laying there. And had we gone another 25 or 30 feet, we would have been impaled, practically stuck on the thing. We couldn't move. So we kind of backed off and motioned the LST following us in line to go around. And when they did, they went around us, and as they made that move, it blew right in half a mine. And you can get a picture of a huge structure like an LST. It's 27 foot long, of steel, welded steel, 50 foot wide, blowing in two. And the crew on board that had a motley assortment of pets. They had pigeons, chickens. What the hell would you have a chicken on board for? I don't really eat it. But they had chickens and dogs and cats. And you know, this is strictly forbidden, really, but they let them get away with this. We were the Suicide Navy, he called us. So it's a very apropos title. When I blew up, there were no chickens, there were no nothing. They were just, these guys went hurtling through the air, and they were fully loaded with soldiers. And most of them died. In fact, the wreckage is still there. It was on the 50th anniversary program. You saw it probably. They said something about the wreckage being there off of Point de Hoc. But they were coming in. Then we proceeded to go in. After we saw that, we weren't too enthusiastic about going in and hit the beach as this is going to happen here. What's going to happen when you get up there? Even though it was a day later. And we started to move in, and we were all armed to the teeth. We had our clothing was all impregnated with chemicals to withstand the gas attack. And when your body got hot, that stuff would itch, would drive you crazy. And we had that on. We were all ready to go. Our life jackets and helmets. I was manning a 20 millimeter, and in we went. And all of a sudden, the PA crackled, and I heard the damnedest noise. And that scared me more than the enemy, really, at first when it came on. Mares, he oaks and oaks, he goats and little lambs, he divey, kiddly divey too. It was the voice of our skipper. He was dead drunk. He was a Portuguese fella. Very solemn-looking individual. Black, dark, you know. In fact, you couldn't see him. We called him the Shadow at night. He'd walk on the bridge, and all you'd see was a glow of his cigarette. And he let it burn to his lip, and he'd spit it out. You know. He was fearless. Here's a guy that's fearless. He's singing "Mares the Oaks." I would have chosen a different tune, really, but everybody burst out laughing. But then, about that time, it was a morale builder in a sense, because it told us that the captain was human after all, and he was just as much afraid as we were. So we went in, we hit the beach, started up the ventilating fans. We had the big tubes coming out of the tank deck, and it sucked the exhaust fumes out. And incidentally, most of the vehicles seemed to be burning oil all the time. I don't know why. Poor maintenance, but anyway, they got them going. And the trucks were towing. This was the 175th Anti-Tank Company. It was part of the 29th Division. And they started to move out when the brake locked on the tank, anti-tank gun in the back, the lead truck. And Marion Burroughs, a friend of mine,